Ladies and gentlemen, capital G here, and let me introduce you to not just a spoonful of sugar, but my active roster. These are all the commander decks that I currently run and maintain. Yes, 28 decks are a lot. Most people don't need this many, but I've been playing long enough that I've accumulated enough cards to run these things. Now, obviously, they're not fully optimized decks. That's never really been my style. But I definitely want to show off what I have here. So if you've got time, crack open a beer, pour a glass of wine, a late evening coffee, whatever it is. If you want to chill out and see what I've got going on with each of these decks, I've taken a few cards from each to kind of show what they are about. Then let's dive in. So let's start with the newest build, which is Hanada, which is similar to the deck that I've done for the channel, but it's not quite there because I don't have any of the, I don't have an extra copy of Spark Double, or never managed to pull a Shakashima. But even then, obviously, we're playing a lot of big spells, so we're going to go wide with things like Shark Typhoon. Distorting Wake is a card I did not put in that video, but should have. Triple Blue is a little tricky in 3 color, but bounce X non-land permanents. Copy things with like Pyromancer's Goggles. Mindlink Mech is actually kind of useful. I've got things like Goblin. What's it called? The Goblin that deals 2 damage to every opponent whenever you cast the instant or sorcery. If you make a copy of that with this, because you totally can, it's pretty cool. Shrewd Negotiation is interesting because I do run the artifact dual lands in here, so you can basically trade a land for a creature or relevant artifact with that spell. Feather, as I highlighted in my Hanada video, is amazing because if you cast a spell that can target creatures and one of them targets, well, one of your creatures, well, you get the spell back. So I thought that was sweet. Heliod's Intervention, a great way to destroy all of the opponent's artifacts and enchantments for just white. Spell Twine basically would cost 4 to target a sorcery in your graveyard, a sorcery in somebody else's graveyard, and cast them both. And of course, Eerie Interlude is a great way to protect the board for 1 white mana. Just blink the whole board. Icy Blast, as I highlighted, taps down all of our opponent's stuff. Especially since Hanada is already a power 4 creature, it basically freezes them, so they don't untap right away. So obviously lots of those shenanigans. Runs a lot of burn spells in order to win the game, but so far still missing a few key pieces. So this one is in progress. Moving on to the Massacre Girl. Obviously this is my Massacre Girl Vehicles deck. I've recently posted a link. It's actually on the Greasefang deck. Well, not deck tech, but the first episode of the first 10 Greasefang. I've actually posted a link to my current Massacre Girl list if you want to see the full list. The reason I had posted it there is because it's a deck that's meant to, you know, create a bunch of creatures. And of course Massacre Girl will come in and wipe them all out. But you can't kill the creatures if they are, and that's an Emotive Draco Leech, by the way. But you can't really kill the creatures if they're, you know, not actually creatures like the Haunted Plate Mail. Or if they're vehicles, not yet creatures like Surge Hacker Mech, or even the Mech Titan Core. And sometimes you just have a creature that can outpace it. So, Slaughter Specialist, for example, it gets +1/+1 counter for each creature that dies, so it can actually outpace Massacre Girl's minus effects. And Sinir, the Dark Baron, it's 2 +1/+1 counters each time. Definitely outpaces it. And of course, the spicy piece, of course, Awaken the Erstwhile, make everyone discard all their cards. They become 2/2 creatures, which Massacre Girl wipes out. Well, that's what we do there. Tivasa, as you'd expect, is all about the enchantments. Some of them are auras, although I'm not actually highlighting any auras in this package because I play a lot of, shall we say, enchantments that don't attach. That way, if our commander is ever removed, and this makes X enchantment tokens, so that's a nice way to really make Tivasa huge in a hurry. But by not relying on auras, that means that if she can't be like 3 for 1, 4 for 1, 5 for 1, although when she is enchanted, Winds of Wrath will definitely give us the advantage. Like I said, the deck is all about the enchantments. No artifacts at all, which is why we're running the Energy Flux. Just lots and lots of enchantments. Especially our Spirited Companion, Sithis, as you might expect. And Island Sanctuary is a great defensive piece. By skipping our normal card draw on the turn, creatures without flying or island walk cannot attack us. But that's fine because as soon as we cast an enchantment spell, we get the card anyway, so... And of course a wizard class. She's a shaman, not a wizard, but hey, draw cards, put more +1/+1 counters. Yes, please. And even the new sagas like Mishiko's Reign of Truth is amazing with her. And that is Tuvasa. Brea. I've done a Brea deck tech on the channel in the past. That was an Enchantress themed deck, and there were definitely some ideas from that made it into my real paper deck. Obviously, I'm actually playing it as an artifact deck, so Possessed Portal, the stacksiest stacks that you can ever stacks. The deck is not a stacks deck, just this one card. But nobody can draw cards anymore. Nobody. And in fact, instead of drawing cards, you're either discarding cards or sacrificing permanents every end step. So this is nasty. But it's Brea, like just by coming into play, spits out a couple of tokens. The artifact lands, by the way, which were not around when I did the original Brea video, but would have been a perfect fit at the time. Definitely running all the possible ones. Things like Teleportation Circle to blink Brea and make more Thopters that way. Panharmonicon to double up on triggers. The infinite combo with Nimdef, Mantle, and Ashnod's Altar. Lots of ways to win here, so you can combo with those. You can just have a bunch of artifacts with Hellkite Tyrant. You can have a bunch of artifacts in your graveyard with Mirrodin Besieged. We've constantly got creatures and artifacts entering the board, so Perforos will just blow away the table. And of course, Tezzeret's Plus is a nasty piece of work as well. Cats! We are running Arabo with our companion. So Kahira, of course, is just a cat anthem. It's just, we can just draw it anytime we want, which is why it's perfect. Obviously, all cats all the time for the greater good. This is a great sack outlet, especially after we've given a cat a buff and we need to draw some cards. Well, that's a great way to do it. We go 4 cards. We go at least 4 cards deep. Mutavolt is a cat just because it kind of sits on our mana base, so good fit here. I haven't deviated from the original theme of cats with equipment, so the deck can go wide or go tall. But I do have a lot of cheap life linkers, which is why I'm running the Sylvan Library here. And of course, because we can make our cats bigger, Arena is a good way to quietly remove creatures from the board. Swords, Sword of Fire and Ice, because it protects from colors that our commander is not. Of course, we can generate some tokens, so of course, let's give them all +1/+4. Why not? And there's our lifelink cats that I was talking about. 1 mana, 1/1 lifelinkers that we can just make humongous and gain a bunch of life with. And of course, the Felidar Retreat, which play a land, you get a cat. Amazing, amazing card for this deck. Arixmathy is one of my signature decks, the one I'm most known for, my LGS. Obviously, when you run an Arixmathy, you want to turn it into a creature, and then enchant it with either Freed from the Real to, tap on tap, tap on tap, tap on tap, infinite green mana. Pemenzor can do the same thing, but it also has the added feature of being able to turn Arixmathy into a 21 attack, 2 toughness flying creature. This can do it. Actually, not flying, but hexproof. But there's other ways to get it to make it unblockable, of course. But really, it's all about the infinite mana dropping down in abundance, so we don't actually draw cards anymore when we go prosperity. Very old school combo, very old school way of ending a game. Everybody draws X cards, but you're not actually drawing cards when you have an abundance out. And there's a few other similar cards for redundancy's sake. It's all about big mana, so throw a few of these enchantments on our lands to just produce more and more mana. And then another place that we can throw our untapped enchantments is on creatures like Leyweaver, which taps to untap lands. And I like to highlight Leyweaver especially because it's partner, which you cast one, you tutor the other. So there's Loreweaver. Once we have our infinite mana, we can dump it into Loreweaver and force all our opponents to draw out. Sanctum Weaver's another way, of course, to give us the infinite mana. And if ever we do turn a Rexmithese into a creature, for those that don't know, it comes into the battlefield with 5 counters on it, and each time we cast a spell, we have the choice to remove a counter. But once all the counters are off, it's a 12/12. This draws us 12 cards and helps us find our piece. So does Return of the Wildspeaker. Shu-yun. Shu-yun was in my first video. It was also the first deck I revisited and did a second tech on. And still a very beloved commander today. Still a lot of fun to play. Pull out the One Punch Monk. It's got prowess, so every time you cast an instant or sorcery. And in fact, any non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can also pay a combination of red and white mana in order to give it double strike. And as I said in my update video, a lot of people dismissed it as being, too awkward to play. But really, there's so many cheap ways to give it either temporary or permanent buffs. And then, of course, you give itself double strike. It's easy to make them unblockable, especially now that we got things like Key to the City. Or even just Artful Dodge. This, I managed to bounce somebody's Cauldron token. They were playing Cauldron Complete. So I bounced the Cauldron token and took the equipment and put it onto Shu-yun. That was a fun day. One of my most recent ads, actually, Discover the Impossible. Sorry. I'm reading them upside down, or at least trying to. But this actually casts 2 spells if you manage to find a mana value 2 or less instant. Because you cast this, you look at your top few cards, if you find the instant mana value 2 or less, you have the option of casting that as well. So that's 2 casts, 2 prowess triggers on Shu-yun, which is amazing. And of course, one of the best counter spells, Stubborn Denial. 1 blue, it's counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. But if we have Ferocious, and Shu-yun is always going to be 4 power by the time we resolve this spell. If we have our Ferocious, it just outright counters the spell, no chance to pay the 1. So, still love running this deck. It still scares the bejesus out of the rest of the table to this day. Old Jofa, of course, I run my all-permanent Sultai deck. And it's just value, value, value. Obviously some powerful spells that take advantage of the fact that I'm casting spells from the graveyard all the time, like Lord of the Forsaken. Paying life, exchanging life for colorless mana. I know, not a super powerful card, but I thought it would be funny just to run Sinbad in here, because, hey, tap, draw a card. If it's not a land, we still get to use it. So, there you go. But all because I'm not running instants or sorceries doesn't mean I don't have any tricks. Marischal Crab, for example, I can channel it to counter a spell unless its controller pays 3. Spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Obviously, a lot of our creatures are multi-type, like artifact creatures, enchantment creatures. So they're easy to have my choice of what I want to be cast. Of course, payouts for that, like Ominous Roost, cast something from the graveyard, get a bird. A Planeswalker that, lets me put 2 cards in my hand and 2 cards in the graveyard. Yes, please. That -2 is amazing. Also run a couple of these Kaldheim sagas, because these are great, especially King Narfi's Betrayal, and I don't have it in this pile, but the other one that I run a lot of, the Trickster Gods Heist. You can just, you go through your 3 chapters, it hits the graveyard automatically, recast it, do it again. The sagas have performed very nicely for me. So has the Massacre Worm, of course. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they lose 2 life. Yes, please. I pulled a Tassinary Told Rider. I did recently make a deck tech on this, which I think is pretty fun. Don't know if I'm actually going to put it into paper or not. But it does a lot of work in this build as well, because I've already got tons of enchantments, and hey, this thing can swing, so yes please. And of course Gary, because Gary wins games. Nico B. I don't pull this one too often. It's actually got a very low win percentage in spite of how oppressive it can be. Because it's all about, taking people's stuff, making them discard stuff, taking that, reanimating stuff from graveyards. I think it's a really, really fun commander to play, but it's got a pretty low win percentage. But the biggest reason I built it is because I pulled this and this on the same night. We do commander nights on Wednesdays at my local LGS, and we play 2 games a night. Everyone, has to pay a fee to play. However, they do get at least 1 booster pack. Whoever wins the game gets a second. And in the first game, I did not win the first game, but I pulled Nico B. The second game, it went to a time limit draw. So for the other pack, we decided to do pack wars and just flip cards. And the card I eventually flipped was this one. So obviously I kept that, but I ended up winning the extra pack with this. But yeah, getting both of these in the same night, it was a hint. It was a sign. It was like, build this. So that's what I did. And it's got some planeswalkers. Some of them on theme, some not necessarily. Yes, I do have a Turgid. Did not choose to run her as a commander. I do prefer the normal art over the alternate, for Turgid specifically. I just like this one better. But we all know how nasty she is. I don't dare run her as a commander. The fact that she has not gotten banned is quite the surprise. A lot of people were expecting it on the last announcement. But so far, people know to, kill on sight and prevent her from taking over the game. So there you go. Obviously, because I got a few planeswalkers, the Flux Channeler is there to help proliferate those counters. Hour of Devastation, just an on-theme way to, deal 5 to the board. Command the Dreadhorde, also an on-theme way of reanimating a bunch of creatures all at once. Deliver Unto Evil, just super thematic and one of Sid McKinnon's great, best pieces. This one is so, nothing else. There's no other piece like this, even in Sid McKinnon's world. And of course, the Elder Reborn, because that's super on theme. It's a 7-for-1 because your opponents discard a card each, then they sacrifice a creature each, so that's 6. And then you get to bring a creature back from a graveyard to the battlefield, so that's 7 for 1 card. Minsk! And of course, Boo. That's my custom Boo. Just announced today when they did the initial, reveal teaser thing for Battle at Baldur's Gate. The Commander Legend set coming up, that there's going to be a Minsk Planeswalker that on ETB and at the beginning of your turn you get a Boo token. Sweet. It's only 2 colors rather than 3, but that's fine because it's the same. It's those 2 colors fit in here. So yes, I am going to make it a point to get a Minsk to put in here. I'm not going to run it as a commander because you can run that specific Planeswalker as a commander. They've added that text to the bottom of the card. But it's just a natural fit in here and in here. Actually, I've got 2 things going on. One, of course, is threaten.deck. Because Minsk has an ability. It says X until end of turn. Target creature you control becomes base power and toughness XX until end of turn. There's nothing on the card or in the rules of the game that says that X cannot be 0. So you play things like Mass Mutiny, take a creature from each of your opponents, swing with them, and then on your second main phase, X equals 0 each of them. Molten Primordial, even better because it's a 6/4 with haste that does the same thing. But I also play sort of a pod style, shall we say. So Divergent Transformations and Eldritch Evolution, Birthing Pod. Because the deck does run a Protean Hulk combo. Uses Protean Hulk to get things like Reviarch, Mog Fanatic, and Karmic Guide, and eventually Infinite Sack Mog Fanatic to shoot down the table. And also, I almost forgot because I didn't pick up this card. You can mutate onto Boo. And this is actually pretty cool to do as well. One of my signature decks, Regna and Krav. So the story behind these guys. I used to run Aloro. Shortly after Battlebond came out, I scooped up these cards. The first time I managed to get them both on the battlefield and I saw what they could do, I just kind of looked at Aloro, I'm like, you're done. So I dropped blue, focused in on these 2. I went pretty hard on it. I've got the Orzhov sleeves. I've got the Orzhov lance from the guild kit in here, and just one of my favorite decks. Yes, it's life gain triggers and aristocrats. Like anytime we gain life, each opponent loses a life. Whenever a creature dies or comes into play, gain a life. Sun Droplet, one of the sweet cards here, because if someone deals damage to me while this is out, it gets a bunch of counters on it. And then every upkeep, mine and my opponents take a counter off, gain a life, trigger all of the things. And my opponents don't even have to deal damage to me. I've got things like the Talisman of Hierarchy that, you know, when I tap it, it deals the damage to me if I choose to make a colored mana. Well, the Sun Droplet sees it, adds a counter, so. And of course, other life gain payoffs like the Crested Sunware to give me some horses, indestructible horses. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. You know the drill. Of course, the Exquisite Blood Sanguine Bond combo. This is where I put it. For those that I don't know who here has seen it. I did put out a video a few months back, almost a year back now, where I was opening a bunch of Jumpstart, and I pulled the Exquisite Blood. I was super excited for it. Like, I've already got the Sanguine Bonds. I have a couple copies of this, but the Exquisite Blood, the one that finishes this combo, did not have it until that video. So, but if this doesn't win the game, if all the life gain triggers don't win the game, this will. Second Sun. Another pull from that video, the Jumpstart video, is Ineas, the Gale Force. I had done the deck tech for this long before I actually pulled the card. But once I pulled the card, I didn't hesitate to build the deck. Obviously, I play a lot of artifacts that do something when they come into play, but are kind of useless afterwards. So like this one, it gives me a card. It lets me draw a card when it enters the battlefield, but then I can pay 2, sack it, add 2 mana of any one color, so basically filter mana. Playing a 2-color deck, so I'm not too worried about the filter. So I just want to draw that card, or I want to name a permanent and say that its activated abilities can no longer be activated. Or in this case, it's a piece of equipment that comes into play with a Thopter equipped to it. So I just want to make a Thopter and then pass off just the equipment and keep the Thopter to myself. And then of course a bunch of efficient flyers. Like Rien's actually really cool here. That trips up our opponents who are casting big spells. And it's a good flying creature. Cloud of Fairies is just, yeah, it's basically it's a free 1/1. It's a free 1/1 flyer. So it comes in, it untaps my lands. I get to play another flyer and wrap those out. Because Ineas wants me to swing with 3 flyers in order to give away junk that I don't want anymore. Even better if I've got the Thraben Watcher, being able to give my entire team vigilance. This is amazing. This has been one of the more recent adds to the deck, and it is fantastic. Of course, Rally the Wings to give the whole team +2/+2 for an efficient 2 mana. Or even better, Training Grounds. Been sitting on this for years. Used to run it in Gelera, and I'll get back to her in a moment. But the idea, of course, is that it has an activated ability of Azorius and 2 generic to give all flying attackers +1/+1 until end of turn. Well, it's an activated ability, so all I have to do is cast this, swing, and then every white and blue source that I have on the board anthems the team. And here's a sneaky piece that I didn't think of at the time. What's cool about this is I can give it to the player on my right, take it from them, and then every time I activate it, I get to do the thing twice. So the thing, of course, being 2 mana, tap, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Its owner then draws a card and may put a land onto the battlefield. So if my opponents use it, well, we both get the benefit. But if I take it from my opponent and take it for myself, then every time I pay the 2 and tap this, I get to use it twice. Atraxa, because of course someone like me, of course, has the Atraxa, and this is the Counters Variety Pack, because we love to proliferate. So, she's got all the keywords, of course, but the big one is at the beginning of your end step, proliferate. So we're proliferating and doubling up on things like charge counters, The Vivids are actually great. People don't like the Vivids because they come into play tapped, but each one is basically perfect mana and it attracts the deck, so I do run all 4 of them. I also run Old Myosian and New because, you know what, I've got pretty good mana with just like these charge counter lands, so it's surprisingly easy for me to cast these more complex Myosian, proliferate their counters, and then remove the counters to get their benefits. Of course, Astral Cornucopia taps for an amount of mana equal to the number of counters on it. Yes, please. This gives the equipped creature +1/+1 per soul counter on it. Yes, please. Anytime I play a land, put a +1/+1 counter on something. Yes, please. Anytime this gets a +1/+1 counter, I draw a card. And then, of course, the alternate win condition, Simic Ascendancy, is when this gets a bunch of counters on it, I win the game. So the counter variety pack for Atraxa. Over to Piru, one of my more recent favorites. It's the old school Elder Dragon templating, but it's the only one of the Elder Dragons that is useful if you do and don't pay the upkeep. Because if you pay the upkeep, well, you got a 7/7 flying lifelink dragon. If you don't pay the upkeep, it dies. It deals 7 damage to each non-legendary creature your opponent. Each non-legendary creature. But because Pure has lifelink, you gain that life. So if there's 10, say there's 10 non-legendary creatures on the board when this dies, you've just gained 70 life. This thing is wild, and it's a blast to play with. I went with Legendary Tribal, so I play with a lot of really, really cool legends in here. Especially with her, I can double up on damage. Liesta is the most recent add. Just randomly pulled it from a Midnight Hunt pack. Got the nice foil version of it too. I don't know if you can see the foiling on it. But look at that last line of text. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Sweet. The first line, whenever a non-token creature you control would die, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So, that's right. I can let my Piru die and go back to my hand instead of the command zone. I've already had this ability with Sigil of the Nudon, which does the same thing. Instead of paying 3 to keep it on the battlefield, I pay 2 to bring it back to my hand for all intents and purposes, and still wipe the board of pesky non-legendary tokens. But because there are legendary creatures we want to deal with, Price of Fame shoots them down. Fire Covenant. This doesn't discriminate between legendary and non-legendary. Just pay a bunch of life and wipe board that way. Or, of course, you pay that bunch of life and deal 40 to Brash Taunter, and Brash Taunter in turn will dome one of our opponents. Or, of course, we can run the 8th Flux Reservoir, get it onto the battlefield, gain a bunch of life, and dome our opponents that way. Or even better, Fire Emancipation. It has happened a couple of times where I've paid the upkeep, and later in the game I've got tons of mana. I've paid the upkeep, have the triple red still for Fire Emancipation, so slam that, and if they didn't respond, swing with Piru for a commander damage knockout. So, a blast to play. Also fun to play is Atali Primal Storm. Just mono red goodness. Swing and cast spells from everybody's deck, ours and our opponents. Lightning Bolt is here. Yes, it is a proven effective commander card. One red, 3 damage in commander doesn't seem so great, but honestly it hits so many things and takes them right off the battlefield. Planeswalkers, creatures, even opponents can sometimes get domed and get knocked out by this, so never ever underestimate Lightning Bolt. Being reprinted in Baldur's Gate, by the way, as a common, so expect to see a lot more Lightning Bolts in your commander games in the near future. Things like Cough of the Hammer to take advantage of the fact that we're running lots and lots of mountains. We want to give haste to our commander if possible. This helps with that. This helps with the haste, because we want to swing and we want to cast our big spells. We also want to make sure our commander cannot be blocked. That way it comes home from combat each and every time. We want to shoot down small creatures, so burn down the house. 5 damage to each creature. Well, notice that Atali's a 6/6. And of course, Dragon Storm. If we manage to hit this, with a Tali, well, we cast all our opponent's spells, then cast this and go get things like Drakuseth or Spawn of Thraxus. So, yeah, I'm running a bunch of big dragons that. Why not? It's just funny to go off of a Dragon Storm randomly during combat. It just is. And one of the nastier little cards here, Rite of Ruin. Choose an order for artifacts, creatures, and lands. Each player sacrifices 1 of the first, 2 of the second, and 3 of the third. So this can devastate boards. I don't mind sacrificing a few mountains because we're casting spells for free once our commander is swinging. So why not? It's like I don't believe in blowing up all of the lands and stopping our players from the rest of the table from playing the game, but I don't mind tripping them up a little bit. Akiri, Fearless of Voyager. This was my choice for the Burrow's Equipment Commander. What I like about it is that as long as for each opponent that you attack with an equipped creature, you get to draw a card. You can also use your equipment to protect your creatures, which is pretty sweet. So, things like Fighter Class to help find equipment and also make equip costs cheaper. We have cheap creatures that we want to equip. We have cheap equipment that we want to put onto our creatures. This one really pays off our card draw, by the way, and makes our creatures humongous. We have creatures that could be equipment. We have equipment that comes into play with a creature. We have creatures that are equipment. So I love the flexibility, like every card does 2 things. Then, of course, we have a creature that makes more creatures, especially when we draw the extra cards. Things like Mad Ratter. This really pays off our card draw. If we've drawn like 3-4 cards because we've swung at each of our opponents, and then we can give one of our creatures plus X plus O and trample, where X is the number of cards we've drawn. We're not running a lot of enchantments. Yes, we are running Fighter Class, but if, say, the rest of the table is running things like Smothering Typh, what have you, well, we cast a white spell, then we follow up with Patrician Scorn, which we can cast for free on any turn we've cast the white spell, and destroy all of the enchantments. And then, of course, I've got a couple of these lands that, these spells that can be a land, just to give the deck a few more tricks. Giganta is up next. It's my Gates deck. Giganta, his goal is to get to the end of the maze. It also taps for Wooburg, but I can only use the colored mana on colored mana costs. If you were to run the deck as a companion with another 5-color legend, you would have to make sure that every card in the deck only has 1 occurrence of each mana symbol. I've chosen to build the deck with the restriction, even though I am not bound by it. I have done the deck tech video on this. This, by the way, is amazing with Maze's End. It combos very nicely because you activate your Maze's End, find your gate, it triggers the retreat. Then you play your Maze's End back from your hand, triggers the retreat again. So it's actually really, really good. We do a lot of spell slinging, so Kess is here. We've got Ral here to help copy some of those spells. K and T to play our lands a little faster. Some cool removal of the Kami War. Just, tap our commander in another land. And Chapter 1, exile something. Yes, why not? And then, of course, the other chapters are cool as well. Or even just Legacy Weapon. Tap our commander, exile something. Dakon is a beast in this deck, too. And Jeskai Ascendancy is perhaps the most powerful card here. Because with our commander out, anytime we cast a non-creature spell, we get to untap our commander and tap for that mana again and again and again. Obviously, we have to be smart about how we spend that mana, but we can get so much value from it. It's my girl, Amanatu. I don't recall the name of the person. Somebody commented with simply 2 words: absolute trash. I'm not sure if he's trashing the video, the deck, me, or just everything in general. I don't know. But he's wrong. Of course, I run the Amanatu Planeswalker Blink strategy. So I've got cards that synergize with the +1 and the -1. The -6 I've never used. I've come close a couple times, but we're not running for the -6. We want the +1 and the -1 in order to, well, the +1 just to, get turn through the deck. The -1 to blink things. Like, this is amazing because with Wishclaw Talisman, it's 1 tap, remove the counter, and you go, and it's basically a repeatable Vampiric Tutor. But with our commander, which blinks cards that we own, not cards that we control, cards that we own. So it doesn't matter who we give the Wishclaw Talisman to, -1, and get it right back onto the field on our side. So our opponents never get a chance to use this. Coveted Jewel is baller. Taps for you cast it, you draw your 3 cards. Tap for 3 mana. Blink it with Amanatu, because Amanatu can blink any permanent. Get 3 more cards, tap it for 3 more mana. Yes. This is a card that I think is a lot of fun. I haven't had a chance to cast this in-game yet. One that I do cast a lot in-game is the Oath of Teferi, because it's part of my combo with a Spark Double. Because what happens here is that I can use our commanders twice, and if I Spark Double Amanatu, they can blink. It's blink a land, blink the real Amanatu, blink a land, blink the Spark Double, and you just go blink, 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 blink all day, and infinite mana, infinite activations. If you have another Planeswalker out, then you can, instead of blinking a land, you can blink the Planeswalker and progress towards your win that way. And then, of course, running the Teferi, Temporal Archmage, and the Chain Veil. So we do, of course, have some mana rocks that make it easy to get infinite activations of our Planeswalkers. And anytime we're running low on loyalty on Teferi, we just use Amanatu to blink it, and it resets. Tesshar, of course, helps us go get some key artifacts. Moonblessed Cleric is a great way to get some of our key enchantments. And of course, Chroma's Vengeance, because at the end of the day, it's our Planeswalkers that we care most about. This does not destroy Planeswalkers, but everything else. Obviously, we don't want to cast this when we have our key combo pieces on the battlefield already, but if we don't, boom. Amanatu. Halar, because Halar kicks, I'll call it kicks butt. Lots and lots of butt kicking. It's an elf, so I'm running some elf synergies to help produce a bunch of mana and a bunch of +1/+1 counters. The Immaculate Magistrate is a great way to really dump a bunch of +1/+1 counters on Halar, because anytime you kick a spell, Halar deals damage to each of our opponents equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it. It also has Trample, by the way, so he's a great attacker too. So, which is why we're going to throw things like Ordeal of Nylea on it. It attacks, gets +1/+1 counters. Once it has at least 3 when you attack with this, you can go fetch some lands, or you can deal damage to something with the Ordeal of Perforos. The Sword of Truth and Justice can distribute +1/+1 counters and proliferate. Yes. New from Kamigawa, the Invigorating Hot Spring. It's just a free way of adding a +1/+1 counter to our commander. There's an example of a spell with Kicker, which means it does one thing if you don't kick it, but it does all of the things if you do in this case. So tons of spells with Kicker. We'll probably see a few more later this year, since we're going back to Dominaria. There's a good chance we'll see some more kicker spells. So let's keep an eye out for that. Because Halar is a great attacker and has Trample, we also want to give it Death Touch. Because how it works is that when a creature with Trample also has Death Touch, it only needs to assign 1 damage to a blocking creature in order for it to be lethal. Everything else can trample over. It's a great synergy. The fact that this can also produce +1/+1 counters for our commander makes it a great synergy. Cultivate is not specifically a synergy, it's just I got a really nice one from the M21 collector booster. So that's what it's here for. And of course, because we can produce a bunch of mana, Crackle with power. If we knock our opponents down pretty low, this will help finish the job. Another one of my most recent builds, Ishin, 2 heavens as 1. I'm running cards that care if you attack with just a samurai. I have cards that care if you attack with a bunch of things. Cards that help make creatures bigger. Cards that help me get more attack steps. Cards that grant vigilance, especially if you double Godo's trigger. vigilance is important because that way all your creatures can attack on both extra combat steps. Cards that give you tokens when you attack, that's always fun. Cards that cause your opponents to lose life and you gain life whenever you attack. Yes, this is a monster, especially when you've got a bunch of tokens and you swing 5 tokens, your opponent loses 10 life before they even get to declare blockers. And then, of course, being able to swing and give the attacking creature +4/+4 with Fervent Charge. Yes. Being able to control combat entirely with the Horde Chief. It also has the trigger where if you attack, your opponents lose life and you gain that life. And of course, we want to protect our commander or our attacking creature, so let's throw a key to the city in here as well. Recently rebuilt Hanada. It was on the shelf for a while, but recently built it back up together. Really just want to copy the ETB abilities or take advantage of some of the hasty activations, like being able to cast Magus of the Mind, pay 1 to get a copy with haste, and pay the blue to sacrifice it and get its effect. Yes, please. Portal of Sanctuary is a way to bring some of our wizards back to our hand and recast it. Deal some damage with the Spark Mage Apprentice. Double up the abilities of our wizards. Yes, please. Harmonic Prodigy. Yes, please. Thank you. This is definitely a cool ability to double up and even triple up on. The Dire Fleet Ravager. Just destroy everybody's life total in a hurry. Time Stream Navigator. Make a tasty token version of this and then pay the 4, tap it, and get an extra turn. Sure thing. Panharmonicon for even more triggers goodness. ETBs. Springleaf Drum. This is a spicy piece. How this works is that Inala's Eminence trigger goes off when the creature hits the battlefield. So when the creature enters the battlefield, you may pay 1. So whatever creature you cast, let's say it's the Spark Mage Apprentice. Spark Mage Apprentice comes down, hits the battlefield. Eminence trigger goes off. Do you want to pay the 1 mana? Yes, you can. You tap it and the Springleaf Drum to get your mana. So I thought that was pretty spicy. A card I do not have for this deck that I do want for this deck is Cloud Key, because that way I can reduce the cost of my creatures by 1 generic mana and gain some advantage that way as well. Of course, the Impact Tremors. Every time a creature or a token hits the battlefield, deal a damage. Yes, please. And Puppeteer Click has always been a powerful effect to double up on in Inala, being able to steal creatures from our opponent's graveyard anytime and always. Edgar Markov. Recently did a video on this. It's not quite the same list as what I had posted. There's some cards that I don't actually have, but by the same token, what I have is already really, really good. Running the Teleportation Circle, because a lot of the new vampires have some pretty cool ETBs, especially when our opponents have lost life. So, like this one is when if like blink this one, and because I do have some party members in here, like clerics, wizards, warriors, just drain the table that way repeatedly, or make some blood tokens, or just deal damage in general. Reset Eureka, so we can always make our opponent sacrifice creatures. We sacrifice Eminence tokens. Florian is a baller. Once you get if this gets left alone, you just swing. It's a 3/3 first strike, so it's pretty hard to block in the early game to begin with. But then if our opponents are constantly losing life and you're constantly churning through cards, it is just devastating advantage. Or of course we've got the Falconrath Pit Fighter, 2 mana, discard a card, sacrifice a vampire, likely one of our tokens, to draw 2 cards. Pitch a card, sack a token, draw 2. I like it. And then Rite of Oblivion. We can sacrifice our tokens to exile stuff. Twice. It's sorcery speed, but it's usable twice. And we've got the Mythos of Stacked Axe. It's a great board wipe. If we're running low on vampires or what have you, we just pay white, black, red, and then each opponent's left with 1 artifact, 1 enchantment, 1 creature. And we get to choose what those things are. Rocking Vile Smasher, the Fierce, and Gelera, Caller of Wirewood. So, Gelera, of course, it taps for mana, and if we've cast a spell of mana cost 6 or greater, we get to draw a card. And my cat's getting angry at me, sorry about that. And, of course, Vile Smasher we all know and love. Whenever we cast a spell, the first spell of each turn, we randomly determine an opponent who's going to take it to the dome, equal to the mana value, take some damage. So, what am I casting with these cards and trying to dome people with? Eldrazi. The nice thing about it is that I have access not only to the colorless Eldrazi, things like Void Winnower, Deceiver, Form, but also some of the devoid Eldrazi, the ones that have a colored mana cost but are not actually a colored spell or creature. So I get to use these as well and stay perfectly on theme. But because these devoid cards are still colorless, well, Ugin the Ineffable still reduces their mana cost, so yay. Of course, some of our Eldrazi specifically require colorless mana. That's not going to be a problem with the talismans. I'm running the Paylands. We can reduce. We can use Urza's Incubator, name Eldrazi, reduce their costs. And then, of course, Corrupted Crossroad is another great land that we can use. It taps for a colorless, or you can pay a life to add a mana of any color to our mana pool for devoid spells. So a great way to help us cast some of our more complex Eldrazi spells. Tesshar plays a lot of really junky enchantments, but it also goes infinite very, very easily, especially when you hit your Ashnod's Altar. And of course, we're playing things that bring artifacts back from the graveyard to our hand. Anytime we cast a historic spell, which includes artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, we get to bring a creature back from our graveyard to the battlefield as long as it's mana value 3 or less. So we're running a lot of cheap spells here. A lot of great tools to help us put cards into the graveyard from our hand. Things like Hazard's Monument, the Professor of Symbology. Restoration of Vijanjo being a saga does trigger our commander. So yes, please. Skull Clamp, of course, to help us draw us a bunch of cards. Brought back for 2 white mana, recover from a board wipe, or get some key pieces back if we're starting to go off. Cathar's Crusade, the deck will win by having a bunch of creatures, and then once I get rolling infinitely, put a bunch of colorable encounters on my team and swing out for the win. And never, never, ever underestimate this card, Blacksmith's Skill. For 1 white, target permanent, any permanent you want, gains indestructible and hexproof. Protects it from everything, quite literally. Any sort of targeted spell, most board wipes. So don't underestimate this card. There's also a green one that recently came out, Tamiyo's something or other. Very, very powerful effect. Never underestimate the power of protecting your key piece. Because chances are it's 1 or 2 pieces that are causing your opponents to cast the board wipe in the first place. Over to Kenriff. This is my mono white Kenriff deck. Yes, it's got all 5 colors, and yes, the deck can access all 5 colors, but really, every card in the deck can be cast with simply white mana. So we've got Kenriff, of course, we've got Behind a Good King is an amazing queen. Blessing, this is just cool. Just the old school Blessing, just white +1/+1. We've got payoffs for everything in the deck being white, like Brave the Elements. For 1 white mana, choose a color, and all white creatures you control gain protection from that color. Sweet. The Evangel of Heliod is a good payoff. You get a 1/1 token for each for your devotion, equal to your devotion to wife. So every white pip showing on your permanents, you get a 1/1, and it counts hybrid. So even though it's a mono white deck, quote unquote, we can in fact count hybrid. So things like Privileged Position, the Novelist of War give all attacking creatures +2/+0. Zerda is a mono white card technically. Divinity of Pride is a white card, 5 mana, get a huge flyer with lifelink. Master Warcraft. No one ever sees Master Warcraft coming. It's like, I'm going to attack, and they'll usually tap their attackers before you even have a chance to cast your spell. But the problem is you have to wait for them to move to their attack step before you can cast it. So communication is important when you have this card ready to go, just saying. And because one of Kenriff's abilities to gain life, a nice spicy piece, the Light of Promise. Enchanted creature has, whenever you gain life, put that many 1/1 counters on this creature. So throw it on Kenriff, gain 5 life, make him humongous. And that is an example of the mono white Kenriff deck. Tanas Ear. My boy Tanas Ear pulled this out of a Strixhaven bundle and decided to build it. I just threw some random junk in, played it, and this scared the bejesus out of the table. Because, you know, I was running things like Llanowar Elves, when Birds of Paradise, what have you. But with Tanas Ear, all of a sudden, that's a bunch of 4/4s ready to swing out and deal some real damage. Especially when you manage to get some counters on them, and Tanas Ear's ETB lets you double counters on something. So, double +1/+1 counters on the Benthic Biomancer, for example, or even the Sky Raider Elf. It's got Converge, which means for each different colored mana spent to cast the spell, it gets +1/+1 counter. And it is entirely possible for this deck to produce colors of mana other than green or blue. The Birds of Paradise does it. You can tap the Birds of Paradise for a red. Even in a Simic deck, you can still tap this for a red mana and use it to get another counter on the elf. You can also filter mana through the Guild Mage's Forum. And by the way, whenever you cast a multicolored spell with this, it gets a +1/+1 counter. The creature spell in question, anyways. Things like evolutionary escalation just really wrap up the number of counters on a creature. And this is amazing, of course, because you can +1 to spit out a small creature, which Tanas Ear will eventually make huge. Or -2, put a 1/1 counter on every creature on your side of the board. Yes, please. Both of these effects are amazing. Chasm Skulker almost stole a game with this, by the way. Every time you draw a card, it gets a +1/+1 counter. I actually tried to destroy my own Chasm Skulker using what's the one that makes Pognify. And someone had to counter a Pognify that was destroying my own thing, because otherwise I was going to have 10 squids, which Tanas Ear was going to turn into 6/6s at the time. Champion of Lamphold, make your team unblockable. Yes, especially with how big this gets, and it gets big in a hurry. One of my favorite early plays in the deck, the Rampaging Monument. Enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever you cast a multicolored spell, i.e. your commander, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So, the sequence is, you play this, it's got your 3 counters. Following turn, you cast Tanas Ear. By casting it, it gets another counter. Then you double it. All of a sudden, you're swinging with an 8/8 trample out of nowhere. That's the kind of thing this deck can do, is just huge creatures out of nowhere. And then, of course, once you have some huge creatures and you need to refill your hand, Prime Speaker Zagana gets you a whole bunch of cards. The least popular deck on my channel goes to Gelera, Master Polymorphis, which is weird because it's one of my favorite decks. I mean, maybe it's not the typical Gelera deck. It's not like trying to make tokens and go get 1 or 2 specific big creatures. That might be the reason. Mine is just a little more random, but a lot of fun to play. And you know, there's been a couple times I've thought about tearing it apart. It is the oldest deck I have in service, but then I play it again and I remember why I still run this. She is cool, so cool. So of course the idea is to either create some small creatures that we can sack off into Gelera's ability, or cast some small creatures like Fibblefip. Just cast it, draw your card, get some value off of it, and eventually sack it off for something bigger and better, like say an Agent of Treachery, or Quicksilver Gargantuan, or even the Diluvian Primordial, and just start stealing instants and sorceries. Scourge of Fleets, bounce our opponent's board's creatures back to their hands. So, sack small things, get big things. That's what we do here. And then, of course, being mono blue, I'm not afraid to run some counter spells because that's kind of what blue needs to do. And I do like to steal things as well. So, steal artifact, control magic, stuff like that. And lastly, a good old-fashioned Eureka, the Tiger Shadow deck. I did a deck tech of my deck, actual deck, after a pretty sweet win. And, well, I've made some improvements, of course, because Kamigawa Neon Dynasty has given us some new ninjas. Obviously run things like Meekstone, because we're not casting our big creatures, we're not attacking our big creatures. Our opponents might try to attack with big creatures, but we're not. So Meekstone, make sure they don't untap. Of course, I'm going to highlight some of the new ninjas, like the Thousand Face Shadow. Does not have ninjutsu, but it's a flying ninja. That's reason enough to run this card. It's a flying ninja. It triggers Eureka's abilities. Silver Master, a ninja anthem effect. Yes, please. Why not? Running, of course, a bunch of these MDFCs. It's a land on the back if we need the land, but it's a spell on the front, so we can, drain life with Eureka if we hit it. My deck does run snow. So Blood on the Snow is just the one example of the snow sorceries in the deck. Snow sorceries and creatures. An alternate way to knock out our opponents is with Adamus. So basically swing if we've got a bunch of differently valued cards in our hand, which, I mean, we've got 1, 3, 6. That's a mana value 9. That's a mana value 8. That's a mana value 9. But it's so easy to meet that condition of having... Is it 6? It is 6. 6 different mana values amongst cards in our hand. Because if we hit someone with this and we have the 6 different mana values, well, they are out of the game. The reason I pulled out Plague Wind is just because I got this nice foily version all the way back from Prophecy. Pretty sweet card. Is that the end of our journey? I think it is. Thanks for, if you're still here, thanks for sticking around and seeing what my decks are about. These are the ones I actually run in paper, and the nice thing about having this many is that you're never quite sure what I'm feeling like running. It adapts to most power levels. I don't run a CEDH level deck, for example, but I can hang with pretty much any group with these decks. So yeah, that is that for tonight. Thank you all for watching, and enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.